You're listening to the League Bound Podcast.
Coming again. Oh, mercy.
Your source for weekly coverage on the future stars of the NBA.
Gives it to Jenkins for the championship.
I'm your co-host, Jake Schrantz.
And I'm your co-host, Branden Blue.
With production for the podcast coming from Broderick Wilkin.
With the first pick in the NBA draft.
Let's go! This is a wild week of the League Bound Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the League Bound Podcast, where we break down prospects and the best players in college basketball while talking about breaking news in the college basketball world. I'm your host, Branden, here with my co-host, Jake.
What's up, everyone? It's been an unreal week for college basketball.
Insane.
I mean, we just got done watching a historic day here in college basketball. Brody, how you doing today, bro?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you for asking. I mean, we got a lot to go over today. We got Jalen Duren for a prospect breakdown. We got all these upsets. I mean, we had one wild week of upsets in one of our episodes, but we just got to go back to it and talk about it again. This March Madness is about to be crazy.
No doubt.
But before we get into all the madness of this week, let's take it back a week and go into negativity.
Negativity.
So what happened with Juwan Howard? We all know.
I mean, yeah.
He was in the post-game line, wasn't happy with a timeout that was called, got into a scuffle with one of the coaches. A huddle broke out, ended up throwing a punch.
Well, kind of a punch.
Yeah. A
Five-finger slap.
A slap.
To the face.
A slap. A slunch, I like to call it. A slap punch. But ended up getting suspended for 5 games. Of all the people I expected to see negativity from this week, not Juwan Howard. I'm here for it, though. It's kind of funny. Like, obviously, it sucks he punched the dude, but, like...
I got to agree with you there.
It's just so wild to see.
Yeah, and the thing is, he was gone now for the rest of the regular season for Michigan. And then their first game without him, they get the win. I think Caleb Houston went off in that game. So, you know...
Versus who again?
I don't have the team up in front of me right now, but I think it might have been Rutgers, maybe?
Oh,
yeah. It was.
But yeah, going back to the Juwan Howard situation, really, does this put him in the hot seat for him as a Michigan coach, or do you think they're just going to kind of blow over? I mean, he's already had a really rough season.
I mean, I do agree that he struggled this season, but I don't think he's in the hot seat. Especially when you look at the successes he's had last year specifically. You know, I remember one of their star players got hurt. Can't remember his name right now. But they ended up still making it pretty far for, you know, where people thought they were going to end up.
Were they a 1 seed last year?
Yeah.
I think they were, yeah.
Yeah, and the loss that they had kind of came at the last minute, but, you know, they still made something out of it. And I think if they had been fully healthy, who knows what would have happened. But Juwan Howard, I don't think he's in his position's in jeopardy. Although maybe if next season this struggle happens, we will see.
And I mean, with this situation, if you're a player watching your coach go and throw hands with another coach, I'm really surprised by the discipline of both teams and team players, because I feel like if you see a coach throw hands, you feel like it's fair game. And like, I'm really surprised like it did not get way uglier than it could have gotten.
Yeah, especially for Wisconsin after just kind of thoroughly beating Michigan that day. And then, you know, one of your coaches just gets basically slapped in the face because of it. It's kind of surprising that they don't really step up and take action, even if it would have negatively impacted them in the future.
What's the news?
And now, going into our news section, I think everyone knows what we're about to cover here, but Jake, Branden, what happened this week?
7, I repeat, not 1, not 2, not 3, but 7 top 10 teams took a loss this week. And they were all on the road, too. I would just like to point out, Auburn, Michigan State, Kentucky, Kansas, Arizona, and Gonzaga all lost this week. I might be forgetting someone, but that is crazy.
That's definitely crazy. Me and Branden, not even 20 years old yet, and we have never seen anything like this in our entire life. So when you can actually say that about something college basketball, a league where pretty much anything you can think of has happened. We've seen a 1 versus 16 upset in our lifetime, but never before have we seen this many top 10 teams go down in one day.
Yeah. I would just like to say I do not take responsibility for KU's loss.
My goodness.
I have no part in this.
They did contribute
Actually,
to the 7 of the 10 top 10 losses.
Matter of fact, this game doesn't exist. I'd just like to write that. Okay.
It's that embarrassing?
Yeah. It's not even embarrassing. It's just sad. But anyways, I'll stop being biased. The first one I want to talk about is probably the Auburn-Tennessee game. Just because Jabari Smith had 27, and he had, he kind of did what we saw at the end of the Arkansas game. He put up that late effort, but it wasn't enough. And Tennessee had 21 offensive rebounds, which I think is wild.
That's crazy.
That is just wild.
Especially with someone like Walker Kessler with that level of talent for Auburn, like, how are you going to let Tennessee, a team who's been maybe the most up and down team so far in the SEC, just absolutely dominate you in that end?
I mean, and you can pick out that stat line alone and just see the sole reason they lost this game.
Yeah, you look at Tennessee, their best performance of the day came from Santiago Vescovi. He had 14 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, so that's not really anything special. That's something he can do on any given night. So really, Auburn just got beat in that one category, and that was the biggest difference.
Also, they shot 5 of 24 from the three-point line. When you shoot that many shots and shoot that poorly. You know who shot worse, though? Kansas.
Wait, you said Auburn was 5 for 24?
Yes.
So Jabari had 3 of those?
Yes.
Of the 5? My goodness.
Yes. That's
Yeesh.
It was you know what's crazy, though? I noticed on the defensive end, and more so late in the game, but on the defensive end, Auburn wasn't even like collapsing on the defensive end necessarily. I feel like Tennessee more was just hitting some crazy tough shots. Like I remember there was a Santiago Vescovi 3 late where I think it was late in the shot clock and he just hit it with like almost 2 people on him and it was like, bruh. And I low-key think Tennessee got a little bit lucky there in the end because Auburn was kind of slicing their defense from like a cutting standpoint where they were just finding holes and finding open gaps. And you could tell Tennessee was kind of having a defensive breakdown collectively. But, I think if they didn't have that, they had kind of went on a slow run to start out that game. And so it didn't pan out the way they wanted it.
Yeah, and for Auburn, looking in the future implications of this team, I'm kind of worried about this team. They're falling off kind of at the wrong time of the year. When your best player, Jabari Smith Jr., has 27 points and 8 rebounds and you still lose to a team that is pretty up and down throughout the year, that is a pretty big concern in my opinion. You can't really ask for much more from your best player. And, Auburn may be looking at a slight upset worry here coming up.
And just one more thing. I mean, you could probably say that for all 7 of the teams that lost in the top 10 this week, that it's extremely concerning for them going into March Madness.
Yeah, I would even say you could do that into this next game with Michigan State pulling off the upset over Purdue late in this Big Ten regular season. Jaden Ivey, he played pretty solid as well. He had 16 points. He was 50% from the field. But, for his standards, that's kind of an average day, which is insane. But Tyson Walker from Michigan State just had that ridiculous ice in the veins 3 from the left wing and just put Michigan State over. What a game, Branden.
Yeah. One thing I would like to point out, the officiating in the first half was annoying me because Zach Edey had I think 2 or 3 fouls early where it was kind of like, those aren't fouls, bro. And there were more calls like that. But I don't want to take away from Michigan State. They did play a really, really good game. It seemed like, again, as I talked about with Auburn, Purdue was playing some really good defense. I think theirs was just kind of more on the offensive end, not getting things to go. They only shot 9 threes and made 1. So that says a lot.
Yeah, and Purdue's one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Which is kind of insane.
It was just a bad shooting night, but I would like to point out Max Christie looked really, really good this game too. He only had 11 points, but seeing him play, he did a lot from a playmaking standpoint and just, getting open, knocking down some tough shots. Michigan State as a whole just looked really fluid this game. It was really impressive to watch.
Talking about this game still, do you think Purdue's in trouble, going into March, even with this one possession loss? Because Purdue has had a couple of these strange losses to teams that are definitely not as talented as them, but they usually respond with a nice little stretch of wins. So maybe Purdue can get hot here and maybe even win the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, Purdue, I feel like they definitely should be a team that wins the Big Ten tournament in my eyes, just because you look at the depth that they have at all positions. And, I think they have Zach Edey and Travion Williams to back him up. And then you have Jaden Ivey at the guard position. I feel like this is the most consistent and solid team all throughout the Big Ten and maybe even the NCAA. And when you look at what they have, I feel like they should win the Big Ten tournament. But once again, that relies on them really being on top of their game.
In the eyes of Chief, what about Wisconsin, though?
That's a fair point. Wisconsin currently right now after today with the outright lead in the Big Ten regular season in terms of record. And, Johnny Davis might be able to take on Jaden Ivey here in the tournament, and we might get some fireworks.
Yeah. I will say Wisconsin is a pretty good team, but I feel like...
Do they really have the size to compete with Purdue, though?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I don't think they match up as well. And with Johnny Davis, I feel like he's kind of become a hit and miss guy in my eyes. I'm not saying he's bad, but it's like you just don't know when he's going to have a game where he's really going to have a really big impact, or he's just kind of going to sit back in the corner.
And I think we've definitely seen that firsthand because, the one night he came down to Lincoln to come play, he just had an absolutely, one of his worst games this season,
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
And he's been at times in the season one of those guys that he'll get his numbers by the end of the game, but may not be as efficient as you'd like it. So that is something that is a concern going into March. But we just have way too many upsets to talk about all of them here today. We've got Kansas losing to Baylor, as Branden already talked about. Ochai Agbaji had 27 points, but he was 4 of 14 from the line, something that we're not very used to seeing, Branden.
KU chucked up a lot of threes this game. In the first half, we kind of set the tone and got everything we wanted. But in the second half, those shots weren't starting to fall, and Baylor kind of just took a hold of our missed opportunities, and they just kind of had their way. They got out in transition, and that's when the game kind of became lopsided. And we shot 7 of 28 from the three as a team. Ochai had 4 of those. When those shots aren't falling, that's kind of your main offense. It's no secret why, things aren't working out.
And now moving on to maybe the most concerning or the most hyped up upset of this entire historic day. The St. Mary's Gales take down the number 1 ranked Gonzaga Bulldogs in senior night for St. Mary's. They won by 10 over who many have said are one of the fake 1 seeds that we've seen so far this season.
Yeah, St. Mary's was hot to come out the game. They had, I don't know how many turnovers they had in the first half, but it seemed like every time I looked back at the screen, they were just forcing a turnover and getting an easy layup or some transition and one call. But yeah, that game was crazy. I'm kind of happy to see this just because I like that Gonzaga's getting some competition in the WCC. They've always just had smooth sailing and, not a lot of adversity, but it's nice to see a team like St. Mary's giving them a run for their money.
Yeah, there's been a lot of criticism. Gonzaga always one of the top seeds in the March Madness tournament. A lot of people want to see them move to a maybe more Power 5 conference, but you look at the stats here for St. Mary's, 14 points off the bench. Gonzaga had literally no points from their 3 bench players, Anton Watson, Nolan Hickman, and Hunter Salas. So if that continues as a pattern, that is a huge concern to me. 3 starters in double figures, that is not going to be enough to be consistent in a losing your out situation like March Madness.
Also, can we talk about Chet? 3 for 7, 0 of 1 from the 3-point line, 0 free throws. He still had a presence on the defensive end, but to see him in one of probably his only top 25 matchups that he's had all season, to see him put up only 6 points.
Yeah, and he fouled out as well.
Yeah.
How do you think the scouts are reacting to that?
I mean, I think a lot of scouts still have their eyes on him as maybe the number 1 pick, but in a tough matchup on the road when the number 1 seed basically is at stake, and he comes up as small as he could be, even though he's 7 foot, whatever. That's kind of a concern, but
I would like to point out his matchup. I believe there were a few possessions I saw in the first half. I believe it was Matthias Tass. There were a few plays where, he was clearly putting the clamps on Chet. Because, there was a few times where he tried to drive downhill, but Chet just could not get anywhere where he wanted to go. And I think scouts will take note of that because he was a little bit of a thicker guy, probably closer to what he'll see in the NBA. So I think scouts will take note of that.
And like I said, guys, I mean, there have been so many top 10 upsets tonight. We really can't go into all of them. Like, we haven't even talked about Arizona, the number 2 seed in the country, losing to an unranked Colorado by 16 points on the road today. Jabari Walker had 15 points and 14 rebounds in 33 minutes of play. Really good game from him, kind of boosting his draft stock even late in this season. But Arizona, another amazing team so far this season that just goes down today.
All right, and so with our 7 teams out of the top 10 losing this week, let me hear from both of you your most concerning loss of the week and your least concerning loss of the week.
Yeah, it feels like deja vu sitting in this chair hearing that question. We've gone through this before this season, but even more upsets here today. And I would say the most concerning upset for me has got to be Gonzaga, just because Chet Holmgren, your best player, comes up playing like he's super passive. I think he's at his best when he gets to dominate the ball and kind of control things offensively for the Bulldogs. And he did basically the opposite of that tonight with how much foul trouble he was in.
And when you look at Paulo and Jabari as the other 2 people he's pretty much competing with for that 1 spot, they're playing this kind of competition almost every single week. And Gonzaga just had their first game versus one of these teams like that, and they just couldn't handle it.
Yeah, and like you said with Paulo, like, him and Jabari are kind of competing with Chet for that number 1 pick. Paulo Banchero in their game against Syracuse here, he had 21 points, 9 assists, which that is pretty scary if he can start facilitating the ball like that. 4 of 7 from 3. He dominated. We already talked about how Jabari was dominant with 27 points. Chet Holmgren really not looking good here today. What do you think, Branden?
For as far as today goes, I do kind of agree with you. I think Gonzaga is probably the most concerning. But at the same time, I'm also not really too surprised just because we've had a small sample of them going up against teams that are more their level. But I feel like that's something a lot of people say. I don't want to become a broken record. I will say, though, I do think Auburn is a little bit concerning as well, just because they've kind of been on a skid. And last week they lost to Florida as well at their home, too. So it's kind of like, I think Auburn might be getting game planned a little bit better. And people kind of are bringing it more since they were that 1 seed for a little while. And they're still atop the SEC.
And then just for the second part of your question, I think the least concerning upset for me would probably be number 6, Kentucky. They lost to Arkansas today. I don't think we've even talked about that yet. JD Notae for Arkansas, like, what else is there to say? He had 30 points and 8 assists as well. He scored from all levels of the court. He had a nice dunk late in the game too, but the reason why I don't think it's super concerning is Oscar Tshiebwe had 30 points and 18 rebounds, so their best player, he showed up, so I'm not too concerned about that. And an interesting story here, the whole Kentucky sideline and bench, they just, like, they left before the clock hit 0. There was about 4 seconds left in the game. I'm not sure what that was all about.
Which could count as negativity.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But like after the buzzer sounded, there was like the 5 Kentucky players on the court and then just Coach Cal on the sideline, and that was it. Kind of a strange situation, but yeah, like I said, I'm not too concerned about Kentucky. I think just because Arkansas is a little bit underrated at this point with how well Notae is playing, and Jalen Williams is really strong inside for Arkansas, so I think it was a good loss, if there is any, for Kentucky.
I just want to talk about the Kentucky-Arkansas game a little bit. But Arkansas, I want to remind people, this is a team that last season, they made it to the Elite Eight and lost against the defending champions, Baylor. And coming into this season, they were a top 25 team. They just had a little, beginning of the season skid. But now they are starting to put it together. So I think people should be on more high alert than they probably are right now. Like, take note of the fact that they just beat number 6 Kentucky.
And don't forget they beat Auburn this season
the
too.
number 1 team in the country at one point.
Yeah, that's really impressive to have 2 top, I guess we could say top 6 teams victories in your resume here this season. Both of those coming at home though, where the crowd was pretty insane.
Yeah.
Get that one on your March Madness board.
Definitely.
As far as least concerning upset goes, for me, I would probably have to say Kansas. But that's just because I think
a little bit of bias there.
Yeah,
Just a bad shooting
I'm just
night,
trying
right?
to tell myself we're all right. But in all seriousness, though, I do think it kind of was a bad shooting night. But I also, I will say I am a little bit concerned with kind of our big man situation, because we have David McCormick and KJ Adams. Both of them are good, but I feel like when they match up against other bigs, against size, their effectiveness kind of goes down a little bit, and I think that could be an issue that we see in March Madness. If we have to go up against someone like Oscar Tshiebwe, we might be in a little bit of trouble. And when you have to rely on the 3-ball like we did tonight, it gets a little scary.
And we're running pretty long on the news section, but I do have one more question that I really want to ask you guys. Out of all these teams losing, which one of these teams do you think will do the best in picking up from their loss and making a good run in March Madness and their respective conference tournaments coming up here?
I think I'm going to have to go with Purdue. We already kind of touched on it earlier. You know, that size that they have with Zach Edey, maybe with some different officials, you know, the foul calls might be a little bit different, but I think Jaden Ivey will be able to turn it on a little bit more. I don't really like when he only shoots it 10 times in a game. I like to have his numbers more, maybe up into like the 16 to 18 shots. That's where he can really start getting his rhythm going. So I think Purdue can have the best chance at, you know, moving and getting some wins here late in the season.
Yeah, I have to agree. When you look at Purdue's game, it really wasn't even there wasn't that much of a margin when they were playing. It was like if there were just 1 or 2 possessions that had gone differently, they easily could have won this game. So yeah, I have to agree with Jake on that one.
The stock market.
All right, so after wrapping up the news section, let's get into, I think, my favorite segment here on the League Bomb podcast, which is the stock market. You know, this is the segment where we're going to talk about some players who got their money up and not their funny up this week. Some guys who've raised their draft stock a little bit, and also, you know, and actually a special episode today, but usually we'll have a guy where, you know, their stock has gone down in terms of the NBA draft. But my first player this week is going to be Drew Peterson, the big guard from USC, 6'9", 195 pounds. He had 17 points against Washington State on Sunday, and he had 23 and 10 with 3 assists versus Oregon State also this week, which is really impressive to get that many rebounds as a guard, but I think the size kind of helps with that. But even today, in a big-time win against Oregon, he had 20 points and 8 rebounds, which, you know, he's kind of showing this consistency late in the season to put the ball through the net. And he's a pretty good shooter, and he's a comfortable ball handler at 6'9", which is, you're not going to see that in a lot of places. But my second stock-up player is going to be Malaki Branham from OSU, the Ohio State freshman guard. He's a good shooter. almost 50% from three this season, which is insane. He had 27 points and 5 rebounds against Indiana in a big win late in the Big Ten season. He also had 31 points, 2 rebounds, and 10 of 11 from the free throw line also this week against Illinois, which is another impressive win for Ohio State this season. And, just late in this season, he's kind of stepping up as a really good offensive weapon for Ohio State. E.J. Liddell has kind of gotten a lot of praise. He's an upperclassman. He's a good shooter, a good finisher on the rim, but so far, Malaki Branham has kind of stepped up and shown why his stock is rising as a freshman.
So for my stock ups, I have Jalen Duren. He had 22 points, 6 rebounds, 3 blocks, and 3 steals versus Temple. This is obviously a prospect breakdown of the week, but I saw this on the stat sheet, and I wanted to show him some extra love before we break him down. And then my next stock up, Oscar Tshiebwe. Y'all already know who he is. Potential Naismith Player of the Year. Center at Kentucky. Going crazy this year. He's averaging 22.6 points, 6 rebounds in 3 games this week. And despite the loss that they had today to Arkansas, I still think he's boosted his name, maybe even for the front runner this week. But we'll see. And for our stock down, we have Juwan Howard's fist. Bro didn't even land the punch.
Well, yeah, it wasn't even a punch. It was just an awkward hand. It was like he was going to commit to a punch, realized, oh wait, I'm a coach, and then halfway through just like extended his hand and grabbed a.
He just high-fived his face, man.
Yeah,
bro.
He almost like grabbed his face like a basketball.
Yeah.
He like palmed his
that handshake line.
palmed his head.
If you look at it, it was like. It's like he knew he messed up as soon as he let it fly, but he was like, it was like at this moment, Juwan knew he messed up. So he was like, I don't even know how to describe it, man. It was wild.
And I mean, all jokes aside, I think for the most part, all the high projected draft picks this week did perfectly fine and, maybe had one slightly underperforming game, but not really enough to say that their stock is faltering. So
yeah, this is an unprecedented week just in general. You have all these upsets, and then you also have almost no one to be stock down player of the week.
Except for Juwan Howard, of course.
Of course.
I will say, though, Chet, I do think we need to acknowledge that 6 points. But at the same time, I don't think it's a big enough sample size to just completely... Oh, yeah, he's down on the list. But something to take note of.
Definitely.
Just a light little asterisk in the notebook.
Performance of the week.
And now for our best performance of the week, JD Notae. First off, I just want to point out that he dropped 22 on 2/22/22 against Florida. So thanks for staying consistent to the date, my man. Also had 30 points and 8 assists today versus Kentucky, and is the leading scorer in the SEC at this moment, I do believe. So yeah.
Even if he's not, like, after today, he's probably the most prolific scorer in the SEC with the way that he can put the ball in the basket from pretty much anywhere. Like today he was just utilizing like floaters in the lane, off the glass, high layups off the glass, long threes, like vicious dunks. He's ridiculous.
When you're at a pickup game and they're like, man, that boy cold. JT Notae is that guy who's like, man, that boy cold. Like, it's just crazy. He just kind of does what he wants, and he's got that cold-blooded mentality.
I'm interested to see where, because I think he's going to go to the draft this year, but I'm interested to see where he goes because he's already 23 years old. So, that usually doesn't help out as a prospect coming into the NBA draft. The NFL is a little different where, you're a junior or a senior coming out. That's a little bit more accepted if you're 23 years old. But in the NBA, where some of these guys are coming in at like 18 years old, that's a big difference.
Yeah. You know what's crazy? I think a lot of these mock draft lists don't even have him listed on there. Yeah, I looked at Tankathon. They did not have him on there. And I just looked at ESPN's top 100 players that they have for their draft class or for their draft cast, and they do not have him on there either. which if you ask me is a robbery. But hey.
I like that this has become the podcast to just push our guys. Like, we have Isaiah Mosley week 1. We think that dude needs to get drafted. You know, we got JD Notae, who I think will get drafted. He'll probably get an invite to the combine. He'll probably play well there. Someone in the second round or even late first round will take him if they make a nice run in the tournament.
The league-bound agenda is the way.
League Him.
And now for our League Him Player of the Week. Max A. Smith put that boy in the league, gosh darn it. He had 34 points versus South Dakota State. And I just wanted to show him some love, honestly. He was last year's leading scorer in the NCAA. And I just wanted to talk about him again. So here I am talking about him again.
Yeah, I believe, off the top of my head, I think they took down Ohio State last year in the tournament, right?
Yes, they did.
That was
round. Probably the biggest upset of the whole tournament.
Yeah, and he was pulling some Damian Lillard range threes, which that is a pretty important ability if he's going to be a smaller guard moving into the NBA.
And what's funny is that wasn't just like a fluke upset. They made it to either the Elite Eight or the Sweet 16, I believe, until they lost to Arkansas, which I think just speaks to how much of a team leader he can be and how much of a role he plays.
Prospect Breakdown.
Jalen Duren, it is your time. Time for your Prospect Breakdown. So going into this week's Prospect Breakdown, we will be covering Jalen Duren, who is a center at the University of Memphis. He is a freshman center, 6'11", 250 pounds, and only turned 18 on November 18th, averaging 11.9 points per game, 7.4 rebounds, and 1.4 assists. So getting into my breakdown, I have him as an athletic beast, runs the floor well, which is something really impressive for someone 6'11". That being said, he does a lot of his damage in the paint. He's really comfortable hitting shots inside the paint, as well as he can step a few feet outside and hit the mid-range shot, but he's not an amazing floor spacer. He can make plays out of soft traps and doubles, which I think kind of shows his IQ as a basketball player, and that's something scouts will probably take note of at the next level. But I think his real bread and butter and what will probably make him most impactful in the NBA is just that he's a phenomenal defensive player thanks to his athletic ability. And he can kind of control the glass when he's on the floor. He can also guard pretty well around the perimeter, which is good for his size. And that quick speed he has allows him to get a lot of block shots. And I think the most threatening part of him for his offensive game is just the fact that he can be a lob threat. As soon as, you leave him on the weak side block and there's only one person in the way, you kind of make that defender commit and just throw it up. He's catching anything you throw up in the air. But now to get into his weaknesses, as I mentioned before, he's not really that much of a floor spacer. Doesn't have that much of a three-point shot. And I have noticed that I think he'll kind of change this once he gets into the league. But just for right now, I've noticed that at times he does kind of struggle to finish through contact with players who are a little bit stronger. He's still bodying them and getting them out of the way, but he's just not getting the actual shot to go in sometimes. But it's something very minor. And I've noticed that he is someone who's going to need playmakers around him to actually make him effective on the offensive game, I would say. And he also doesn't really have a whole lot of finesse/craftiness to his games. And what I mean by that is kind of like post moves. A lot of his game is just kind of back down, being a paint bruiser, and that's kind of all there is to it. As far as where he gets drafted, I would like to see him fall to a team like the Thunder, who already has an established backcourt and has a playmaking point guard like Josh Giddey and a shooting guard in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who can kind of just get a bucket whenever he wants. Strong driver, and I think he has the playmaking ability to, collapse defenses and kind of just throw those lobs up to Jalen, when they break down the defense, which I think would make them a really scary team.
Yeah, now what I think about Jalen Duren, obviously Branden kind of did a pretty good breakdown there. He's an elite athlete, like he said. His vertical is insane. He uses it to throw down some vicious dunks we've seen this season. almost 12 points per game, just over 7 rebounds a game. But I think one of the biggest things there is the 2.3 blocks per game. He even had a 6-block game against St. Louis in November, which is crazy. Not as crazy as Walker Kessler having like 12 blocks in a game. But yeah, still an impressive feat for someone who's 6'11". But to his weaknesses, like Branden kind of already talked about, he definitely relies on some good point guard play to unlock his offensive potential. Unlike some of the better bigs we see in the league today, and not even really just the better bigs, just some of the best players in Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic, they can kind of get their own shot, even facilitate the ball to other teammates, almost like a point guard at times. But I like the fit that you brought up with the Thunder. I kind of see Jalen Duren in the NBA being similar to like a Robert Williams, an energy guy. He puts in a ton of hustle on the floor, which is probably my favorite thing about him, is that he has a high motor, which I think is going to be important for an undersized center, if you can even call a 6'11", 250 undersized in this league. But, with the Thunder, with a team like Josh Giddey, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as their franchise players, those are two guys that are really going to like to play fast and transition. And I think bringing in a player like Jalen Duren is going to be helpful in terms of moving in transition and playing fast.
So coming into this draft, with our prospect breakdowns we've done so far, a lot of them have had pretty set in stone picks, or pretty good ranges of picks where we know where they're going. I think Jalen Duren's a little bit different in that department, and you guys already said you think he would be a great fit with the Thunder, but kind of you guys giving a personal ranking for him, where do you guys think he should deserve to go in the draft compared to the other players in the lottery?
For me, I'd say he could go anywhere from like 5 to 10. Personally, I feel like he's more of like a 7 through 10 pick, just because I'd say he's maybe not as versatile, or I don't want to say versatile, but not as two-way as some of the other players are in the draft. But I think he's definitely a top 10 pick.
I think Jalen Duren could slide out of the top 10 depending on how the lottery falls. A team like New York definitely wouldn't take another big. I would say that one team I would look out for in terms of taking a big would be San Antonio, just because they already have DeJounte Murray, so that's kind of their point guard set for the future, so they don't really need one of these guards coming up here. So I could see them kind of pairing him with a young big like Jalen Duren, who still has a lot of room to develop in terms of offense, and that duo of Murray to Duren could be a nice little pick and roll option in the Western Conference. But like Branden said, I don't think he's going to be near that top 4. Tankathon still has Shaedon Sharpe at 5 to the Pacers right now. I don't think he's going to be in the draft class, so we'll see who the Pacers end up taking. They'll probably take another guard, but yeah, a lot of these top teams need guards, so I could definitely see Duren maybe sliding out of the top 10.
One thing I would like to point out about Jalen is I do feel like I feel like this is kind of a wild card, but we could maybe see him become a volume scorer. Because, he's kind of shown flashes with his mid-range shot. And I was even watching the Wichita State game. He had like 14 points, but all of his shots came off of like face-up mid-range pull-ups. And they weren't like wide open. Some of them were like in people's faces too. So, as players go into the league, they'll probably fit into a little bit more of a role. But, with him, I feel like that's something he could maybe even harness a little bit. And that could take his game to a whole nother level that we kind of didn't see. One player that, I kind of think of with something like this happening, someone like Steph Curry, because he added that ball handling element, and that just elevated his game to a whole nother level. So that's something I would watch for Jalen when he gets into the league.
Yeah, and we've also seen that in terms of bigs, in terms of ball handling development with like someone like Bam Adebayo, who has a pretty similar, body type to Jalen Duren. They're both kind of around that 6'10", 6'11". They're strong, obviously. So if Jalen Duren can add like a ball handling ability to his game, that could be pretty scary. We've seen some players who are similar to him, like Giannis, when they can kind of run the offense through them, through pick and roll action, that is when the Bucks really get scary. And whoever drafts Jalen Duren, if they can develop some, ability to play make, he could be the next Bam Adebayo even.
Trivia.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for my favorite section of the podcast, just because I talk the most out of this part. But the trivia section, where I give these two gentlemen, Branden and Jake, a couple questions to end the podcast to see who comes out on top with my trivia coverage here. I got 4 questions for you guys today. I think, what is it? I think it's Jake has 3 and Branden has 2 wins apiece. So let's see who comes out on top. Can Jake extend his lead, or can Branden tie it up?
I will tie it up.
For question number 1, when March Madness was canceled in 2020 due to COVID, the sports betting industry took a big hit. But how much money did they lose? This is multiple choice. Is it A, $795 million, B, $8 billion, C, $1.7 billion, or D, $4 billion?
I want to go with the 1 point whatever billion.
That's what I was going to say too. Yeah, I'm going to stick with that for now.
You guys both going C?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Well, the answer is D, $4 billion.
Okay.
I was trying to get a little tricky there, try to throw you guys off guard. I definitely did that there.
The sports bettors.
Maybe I can come out on top. But yeah, no, it's crazy. They put up $4 billion lost from COVID canceling March Madness. For question 2, we all know that the perfect March Madness bracket is practically impossible. However, do you remember how impossible it is? Is the chance in the A, trillions, B, quadrillions, C, quintillions, or D, sextillions?
I think it's C. I think it's quintillion.
I want to say quadrillions.
Okay. Is that your final answers?
Yes.
The answer is C, quintillion.
Let's go.
Jake got it right.
I see you pressed over there, Branden. You know it.
Oh, man. Jake looking to come
I'm
out on
nice
top
with the trivia.
again.
How many times do I got to prove it?
But we have 2 more questions left, and Branden could easily take this back. So, with that, I do have kind of a, what do they call it? What's the website called? Tankathon? Mm-hmm. I do have kind of a Tankathon-like question here, and we'll see who knows the NBA draft the best here.
Ooh.
Number 3, who got drafted 5th overall in the 2014 NBA draft? So that's the 2014 NBA draft. Who got drafted
5th overall?
5th overall. We'll take turns here. Since Jake won it, I think he should go first.
Nothing on my screen just to prove it here.
Yep. I trust you.
5th overall 2014. So I know, maybe he knows this. This was the Andrew Wiggins draft, I believe.
Yep.
2014.
But he went first.
He did go first. I'm trying to think after Wiggins. You said 5th?
5th overall pick. I don't know. Should I give you guys the team, or is that too much?
That might be too much.
That might be too much because
Okay.
I feel like I would
You
get
know
it right
what? Yeah.
away. Man, this is tough off the top of my head. And I have Branden just staring at me with this epic outfit that he has on right now.
You'll see it on the podcast cover. Don't worry.
Dude, I don't know a guess off
Throw
the top of
something
my
out
head.
there.
Jabari Parker? I don't think that's right. I think that's the year before.
Okay.
Aaron Gordon.
Aaron Gordon.
That's
Yes.
probably correct.
Because I'm going to find
I
who
think
was.
Brandon's right.
Because I'm
That
going to
sounds
find
correct to
who
me.
was closer. Because neither of you guys actually got it right.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
But I think both of you guys listed people who were in that draft
Was it
class. I'm
Dante
pretty
Exum?
sure.
I'm pretty sure. Who did I say?
Jabari Parker. He was the second pick.
He was?
Yep.
Wow.
In 2014. So Jabari Parker was the 2nd overall pick
Okay.
in that draft class. Aaron Gordon was the 4th. Branden gets the point. I will give Branden the benefit of the doubt because he was closer. I'm not just going to say both were wrong. It was Dante Exum
Ooh.
at 5th
Ooh, that was
to the
close.
Utah Jazz. He actually said it, too. I'll give him the point.
Yeah, that's
it
a
is
fair
tied
point. That's a fair
1-1,
point.
and we're going to need a tiebreaker here
Let's go.
with the last question. I hope I can make this a good tiebreaker. Actually, you know what? This will be a good tiebreaker because it'll be whoever's closest to the number. All right? So, number 4. How many countries outside the U.S. have had multiple number 1 overall picks?
Okay.
I'm going to take a guess of 4 because I know of 2 off the top of my head.
Well, you see, I know of 2 as well. And I want to say 2, but I know that it's going to I'm going to go with 3. That's going to be my answer.
Actually, I'm changing my answer. I'm going 6.
Okay.
I'm sticking with 3.
And Brandon's sticking with 3. The answer is 3. Congratulations,
Wow.
Brandon. He got it on the money. And he takes this week's trivia section. Now, for anyone who's curious, other than the United States, it was Canada,
Australia.
and Nigeria. Who, let me double check.
Didn't Bargnani go first?
Let me give you that right now.
I'm pretty sure Andrea Bargnani went first.
But wasn't it like multiple?
So they had Hakeem
Oh.
and Michael Wakanandi.
Who the heck is that guy?
1984 and 1998. So quite a while ago, but
Yeah, Andrea Bargnani's from Rome, Italy. But I guess if you said it was more than one first overall. Okay,
more than one. Because
that's where I got messed up.
So there was 5 other countries that have actually had number 1 overall picks. So that would have been 8.
Okay,
Did the math properly.
I guess that's
but-
where I messed up.
I bet
then.
I can name all the Australian people who got drafted first.
All right, go ahead.
Cap.
Ben Simmons, Andrew Bogut, Kyrie Irving.
Yep, he got it.
Wow.
I'm different. I'm correct.
Tie game in the trivia.
All right, tie game. It's 3-3 for trivia now. We'll see who takes that lead back next podcast. But I think that's going to do it for today.
Yeah, that's going to do it for us today here on League Bound. Thank you guys for watching and listening. You can follow us on social media. You can follow me at Jacob Schrantz on Instagram and Twitter.
Brandon?
I don't
Where
know
can
if
they follow
I don't know if y'all hear that, but that's the sound of my chains glistening after this victory. But y'all can follow me on Instagram at Branden.Blue with 2 E's at the end.
Follow the champ on Instagram. And you can follow me at Brody Wilkin on Twitter, at Broderick Wilkin on Instagram, and Broderick Wilkin on YouTube. And for anyone still curious, we are on Spotify and YouTube. You can find us on Spotify at Leaguebound and YouTube at Leaguebound. Thank you very much for listening. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us. Rate us 5 stars because I do have that on Spotify now. We would greatly appreciate it. I think we have a ton of fun with this. We love doing it. And we can't wait to get back on this next week.
For sure.
Thank you guys. Have a great day or night or whatever time you're around. All right.